Today we're going to try a split screen with the easel cam and the palette cam. And so this could be exciting. Let's get started. Here's the photograph, and if you want to screen capture it and use it to create your own painting, go right ahead. This is my photograph, so there's no copyright infringement or anything like that. It also will allow you to see what I was looking at, and that might be informative. Now we're going to get to the painting. And what I'm doing for the first time is a split screen with the palette cam and the easel cam. I'm hoping that's going to be easier to see. It looks like it might work. So yesterday I did this and had the palette cam in a small window, and people felt like they couldn't see it very well. So this is sort of a redo, and I'll talk it through a little bit. So the first thing I do is put out cerulean blue, a permanent rose, and Naples yellow, because that's going to be a neutral gray. I want a light gray for the background. So that goes in. That's very often my go-to gray. And that's because the cup itself is transparent. So mostly what you see are just changes in temperature that you see in shapes through the cup. You can see that on the upper left-hand corner that looks a little bit yellower, and that's because I add a little more Naples yellow to the gray because it's warmer there. So the overall picture itself, the overall cup is one value. So I have to change the way things look by using temperature, not necessarily value. Everything is going to be a value of about 2 or maybe 3 at the most. I might go down to 4 for the edge of a cup, but not much. So the challenge is this is all one value, basically has no color other than the neutral that you see through the cup. And the challenge here is, what I'm doing right now is putting in Naples yellow instead of white out. I'm going to be careful not to touch those places. When I'm all done, it's going to look like those are white because everything else will be darker around it. I just do that instead of masking fluid because I'm very klutzy with masking fluid. You can see the palette stays pretty clean, now I'm adding some blue and some permanent rose. I'm trying to get a darker gray here, but darker only relative to the background. There's my first test dab. It wasn't dark enough. I'm going to go in, add more cerulean blue, more rose, more Naples yellow. Did I get as dark as I want to get? There's a test tab. It's not dark enough. Go back to cerulean blue, more rose, more cerulean blue, because it's cool. I'm saying to myself, where it's cool, I need it to be dark. That's darker. I think, oh, no, didn't feel like that was dark enough. Added more cerulean blue. Now I got to dialed to the neutral value that I wanted. It's probably not even, it's probably like a half a step darker than what's in the background. It's not a whole step by any means, but it was cooler. I could see, in other words, it was bluer. Now, as it went around the rim, I could see that it got warmer, and so I had a little bit of orange that I put in as it went around the cup. The brush is 1 inch wide at the bottom, and the paper is 7 by 11 inches. It's on an arch block. So that's a large brush, and I'm using the brush to carve here. I'm using the brush and using it going stroking, using as few strokes as I can, but going with the direction that I see the forms. If I can do that, it creates a certain amount of energy, and I think there's something really painterly about that. I think that might be one of the things that really distinguishes painting from drawing, would be the gestures that you do with the brush and how that gets translated, somewhat like a signature does when you sign your name. Everyone's brush strokes are very personal to themselves. Let's see what's happening now. All right, I'm still just looking for any changes that I can. Now, like I said, I'm not painting the surface of the cup, I'm painting through the cup. The mistake that I made in the past has been to paint the surface of the cup, and I got very accurate at doing it, but I didn't get transparency because I was painting the surface. This is all about seeing through the surface. Because the cup itself doesn't really exist. The cup is like a pane of glass. It just happens to be formed into the shape of a cup. The only place where you can see some color changes are when you can see where the glass gets condensed, or where there's refractions of some kind. Now, if you look at the photograph, you can see there are some pretty orange places along the rim at the bottom left, and I'm dialing in to make that happen. I created an orange, but then you might see I dragged through the gray in order to gray down the orange, because I don't want anything to be as bright as the fruit orange that I'm going to put in at the very end. I want that to be extremely saturated, extremely bright, and look weighty. I need it to look like it has weight compared to the cup, which should look fairly weightless. So there's a lot of gray in that orange. You saw me drag, you can see where I dragged through my gray pile because I left some orange behind. So that is all very deliberate. And you can look at the value dabs now, they're mounting up, but they've all been grayed down to some extent. They're either grays or been grayed down. I'm looking really closely along the edge of the cup. I can see where it's darker on the left-hand side. There it goes. I think that was cerulean blue with a little bit of Naples yellow in it. Not much because it looked very green to me. And so anytime I can lean my gray toward a color that I can name, that helps me add some color to what is already neutral. It felt like it was warm underneath the cup, so I put some orange in. Now, by about now, I've been painting for a while, and I start to see more things than I did when I first sat down. It's a strange phenomenon, but what's important here is a certain amount of editing, because if I paint everything I see, it'll be really distracting. So I have to pick and choose, what's going to be important. I think where I'm going now is maybe the bottom of the cup. Yeah, the bottom of the cup. I want that to be dark because I want it to look like I went into the cup, and it is dark. There's some dark shapes there that create form. That's mostly cerulean blue and probably a little bit of the gray of that background color. So I need that for it to start to look like it has some volume. And again, you can see the brush. The brush is moving the way the cup is formed. Let's see what happens next. I can't remember. But things are starting to look a little bit okay. By now I should have walked away and looked at what I was doing, but of course I forgot to do that, but it's helpful. All right, so now it's time to clean off the palette, and now I'm going to work on the fruit form. And remember, I said I wanted it to be extremely saturated, so there's no gray in it at all, and I want it to look like it has some weight. So I have orange with a little bit of cadmium red in it, and now a little bit of alizarin crimson in it. This is about the consistency of gravy. It's pretty thick. Then I went to quinacridone gold because I felt like that would work well. And now quinacridone sienna. Quinacridone gold and quinacridone sienna are two colors I've changed on my palette this summer because I just I needed more vibrancy, and these are both Daniel Smith colors. I found that the ones that I had that correspond to this in Winsor Newton were just dulling down. Not right away, but the next day they looked dull down. Now what's interesting to me is the refraction that you get when the glass is round, where it intersects with that orange. That's the whole reason for painting this painting, actually. So I wanted to create those shapes. So I spend some deliberate time looking and putting them in and telling myself, don't put down what you think is there, put down what you see is there. It's weird. I know it's round. I know that the orange is round, but what's important here is that it gets distorted, and I need to respect that. You can see me add some cadmium yellow and probably some lemon yellow also, because I need that for the lighter side of the orange. So you can see how bright that is, although I'm going to come back and make it even brighter later. Now there's a cast shadow from the orange, and of course there's going to be quite a bit of orange in that, but I'm also going to have to, there's my cerulean blue and my, permanent rose with a little bit of orange, because remember what I said, there's that gray background. So I kind of have to establish the gray, and then I can add orange to it. But that gray still exists. It didn't go anywhere. It's always going to be there because that's what the cup is sitting on. Now, because I made those changes on the orange, suddenly I see some other things, that the edge of my cup wasn't as dark as I needed it to be, so I made a few adjustments there. I'm not sure what happens here. Let's wait and see. All right. Guess I'm looking for any spots where that orange is depositing color, as long as I have it all mixed up. All right. That's a little bit carefully done. And reinforce those orange spots, not spots, but reflections in the rims. All right, so this is pretty slow going. This might be, oh gosh, I keep trying to remember if I made this 4 times as fast or twice as fast as I usually work. I just don't remember. But the whole painting took me, about 30 minutes, which is a long time to concentrate. You know, it's really hard to concentrate. But I had a plan at the beginning, and if I stayed committed to the plan, then I could say to myself, "Am I still with the plan?" Yeah, you're still with the plan. Remember values 2 through 3. Remember the gray background is always going to be anywhere that you see through the cup. Now I'm reinforcing some decisions I made at the very beginning. You know, those beginning decisions are like the most important decisions. You can make adjustments as you go along, but they're super important. And so it's kind of like going back and underlining an answer that you know is correct. And that's kind of what I'm doing there. Just, I haven't changed the value very much, but I have reinforced it with a certain amount of pigment or color so that so I don't end up, these grays have to look like they have color in them. Otherwise, if I do this as a black and white, I'm going to end up with something that looks like a pencil sketch. So I'm finding as much color as it's possible to find in my grays. The other thing that's happening, because I'm using a lot of cerulean blue, is I'm able to capitalize on complementary colors, because the opposite of blue is orange. And I think orange and blue play off each other really nicely. By now the orange is dried, and I feel like it's not as weighty as I want it to be. So I'm going back in and adding a little bit more to that. Same colors as I used before, but a second coat. A second coat will just give it more weight. Doesn't change the value at all. Doesn't change the value or the color, really. I guess you could argue it's a little bit brighter, but it's not going to change the value. There's no value changes here. So by now we're getting pretty near the end of the painting, but I think I felt like things weren't quite where I wanted them to be. That can happen a lot because, at this point, I could go rogue and start putting in some arbitrary things, which would give me some satisfaction for the moment, but they won't follow the plan from the beginning. I kept thinking, remember your plan, Joe. Your plan was to stay within the values of 2 and 3. You cannot violate that plan, as tempting as it was. So I stuck with it, went in with some cerulean blue once again, where I thought things were slightly darker, but I'm not going to go any darker than cerulean blue. Well, I thought not at this point, but in fact, in a moment, I actually do. But nothing of consequence. But there's a key thing coming up right here, which was important. I didn't have a connector between the top of that cup in the front and the bottom of that cup near the front. And I do find a connector. I kept squinting and squinting and trying to figure out, what is that color? What is that color? It's a neutral. I can't name the color. What is it? And found the rim color. And that's a lot of mixing just for one little stroke there, but it matters. And let's see, now this is the first time I think that I go in and use a darker blue. I picked up some ultramarine blue and mixed that with quite a bit of Naples yellow, because I perceived that there was just a dark stroke there and there, those 2 spots. They don't make or break the painting at all, but I felt like I needed them. You could take them away. I'm so sure it makes any difference at all. But I still didn't have the connector I wanted. So I'm not sure. I think I clean the palette and then come back for some final adjustments. Yeah. And I might not have included that on this video. I may have to add some more to the video. Yeah, I think I do. Darkening up it's darker now under the plate, but it's also warmer. I'm still finding that orange under there. All right, I'm going to put in another clip which shows that final connector. All right, here's that final connector. I just added a little bit of a clip. Well, and before I find the final connector, you can see how many value dabs I have up until this point. That's a lot. And I don't have I don't have the palette cam for this, but this was important. Right there, right there. I needed that. I needed that desperately because it connects the bottom of the cup to all the way up the wall and into the whole plane of that cup is now there. And it just wasn't there before. It was a gap. Everything else I'm doing at this point probably isn't too important. And arguably, maybe I should have stopped. I'm not sure. I hear the dog barking, but I'm going to ignore it because I don't want to narrate everything all over again. So let's see. I hope this works out. The dog was barking, and I stopped her just for a second. We'll see how long that lasts. Yeah, there's that connector that I was talking about. So important. But I don't think anything else is important after this. The only thing that's important after this is not to keep painting, you know, to know when to stop. But I felt like by now that I had achieved transparency. And remember, the goal was using values only 2 through 3, finding variations of gray that you see through the cup, which are the background, establishing that everything is grayed down, having to do with the cup, and that the form that is not doesn't have background color in it, the weighty orange, to make that as bright and saturated as possible. Anytime that things started to seem warmer, to add either yellow or some orange to it. Anytime things were cooler, I veered towards cerulean blue. Other than that, everything was just sort of figured out step by step, shape by shape. I really didn't even look at the entire cup. But remember, we were painting the cup, not the surface of the cup. We were painting through the cup. That was the goal, was to paint the surfaces through the cup. And I think in the end it worked out. But you can see how many value dabs it took to get there. And those value dabs represent a lot of mixing on the palette, an awful lot of mixing. It just takes that amount of, you know, it's funny because you don't spend that much time painting, but you sure do spend a lot of time mixing, or I do. I spend a lot of time mixing, and then I spend a lot of time making those dabs, putting them up near the painting, trying to make sure that that they'll work. I have to see them next to the painting. And in the end, you know, my goal is not to make a photorealist cup. That's not my goal. I want a painterly cup. I want to make it look like a painter did this. And in the end, I think I achieved my goal. So remember to keep the whites of your paper white, your paints wet, mask for value, mix for color. Please join my YouTube channel. If you're watching this and haven't subscribed, please do. And I will see you next time. Okay, bye-bye.